Meredith, thank you very much indeed. And I promise today I'm not going to mention anything about flying, because apparently I've triggered some of the more nervous flyers in the audience by my comments from yesterday. Absolutely, I cannot cover all of Europe. I'm going to talk a little bit about our own experience at the Royal Free Hospital. What I've been intrigued by, actually, is though we have many differences in different regions, actually the similarities in the presentations, that passion of HIV providers to provide joined-up care for older people with HIV, because we know that we're the providers very often that people trust. We know that people living with HIV have told us their story over many years, and now they want us to grow with them to adapt to care for them into old age. This is my declaration with regard to this talk. We initially started the SAGE clinic, which is our older persons clinic, with 2 unrestricted grants from Gilead Sciences. We've used all of the money from Gilead, and we're now running this independently as part of the NHS. So, frailty we know is included in European guidelines around HIV care. We also know that, of course, we have an imperative to improve quality of life for people living with HIV, and this is really important, particularly as people get older. And we don't really have, and certainly in the UK at the moment, whilst we're updating our monitoring guidelines for people living with HIV, we don't have anything dedicated that looks at integrated HIV and geriatric care specifically. You can see the logo at the top here. I mentioned this yesterday. This is our UK and Ireland network of people who are implementing care pathways for older people with HIV. We're currently working on a standards document for use in Ireland and the UK around the care of older people living with HIV, so that every service can try and achieve the same standard in terms of care provision. What about screening? Well, screening is quite variable. I'm not going to go through this in detail in the interest of time. I'm not here to talk to you about different screening techniques. What we actually use at the Royal Free is we use a modified 5-point Freed score based on the Freed frailty phenotype. We have what it was originally called an annual review clinic. We've realized now that most people do not need this review annually. So we have a nurse and pharmacist-led review clinic that goes through all of the points in the British HIV Association monitoring standards for people with HIV that people can have in replacement of a normal visit with their provider, or they can have it as an additional visit. They attend this clinic when they're over 50, but they can attend at any age if they choose to. And as part of that clinic, there is a frailty screen. It's the 5-point modified Freed, which I'm coming on to. And if they score significantly on this questionnaire, then they also have a grip strength monitor and a timed get up and go analysis, which I'll come on to. But you can see as this 5-point screener, we asked them in the last 12 months, have you noticed any of the following? The inability to grip with your hands, unexpected decrease of weight that's worrying you, slower walking than usual, not feeling full of energy most days of the week. And I really hate point 5 because I think it's confusing, but being much or less active compared to someone who spends 2 hours on most days on activities such as walking, gardening, household chores, or do-it-yourself projects. So essentially, if you spend 2 hours doing those things, do you feel more tired than your friends or people that you know? Time get up and go, you can of course do just by using a stopwatch and having some markers on the floor, which is how we started out. But in fact, we now have a Q-tug machine, so we have little monitors that people wear around their ankles, and they do the time get up and go test, which gives us a much better analysis about not only the time they take, of course, to complete this task, but also how stable they are in addition. So from our local Q-tug data, you can see that from July 23 to July 24, we screened 160 people. 3/4 of these were male, the median age was 60. And in people who are 60 and above, we can use the Q-tug to calculate the risk of falls and of frailty. And in our sample, 86 were over 60 years old. You can see the median frailty score was actually not frail, but the median falls risk estimate did show people to be, the majority of people fell into the low risk of falls category. But you can see in terms of distribution, we were picking people up who had a high or very high risk of falls, and also picking up people that were frail, pre-frail, or very frail. Now, one of the barriers to using this machine has actually been our staff. When they're very busy, they find this a bit time-consuming, and sometimes they probably don't do it in people where they should be doing it. The service users, however, did find the intervention acceptable, and staff have highlighted to us that they do tend to perform this test on people they perceive to be frail. So rather than having the time to use it as a standard screener, they're kind of cherry-picking those people for whom they think this will be most useful in. We started out with a carousel model in terms of our frailty clinic. So we had an in-house physiotherapist, an occupational therapist, myself, a geriatrician, a dedicated clinic nurse, and a dedicated specialist pharmacist, and people spent about 15 to 20 minutes with each of those individuals. That model fell apart during COVID. It wasn't sustainable, and also we did find that if one or two people didn't show up for clinic, that was a huge resource to have put in place for people to then not attend. So actually, since COVID, we've reverted to really just a comprehensive geriatric assessment conducted by my geriatrician colleague Hal Jones, who really now is running this clinic independently with a little bit of HIV advice from me. I heard this mentioned in some talks yesterday. I'm just going to tell you a story that happened in the first clinic. So in the first clinic, our occupational therapist came back to us for the post-clinic meeting, and she said, when I ask people questions, they look quite shocked. And we said, well, what were you asking them? And she said, well, I was asking them if they had any aids at home. And we had a good reflection about the fact that language is incredibly important in context. And of course, yesterday we heard walking aids, hearing aids. We, of course, know what we're talking about. But out of context, for some people in an HIV clinic, that was a strange question to be asked. Now, I haven't found a decent phrase to replace aids when we're talking about things to help people around the home or help them with activities of daily living. But nonetheless, I think just a reflection that sometimes language in our context can be important. What do we know about bespoke services within HIV care? We saw on the map across the US what clinics are running. We've got some examples here from around Europe, but also, of course, the Golden Compass Clinic. Again, very much I think there's been an alignment in terms of the way we base our models of care for designing clinics for older people with HIV. Certainly, we based ours, the Sage Clinic, very much on the Silver Clinic run by Jaime Vera in Brighton. Giovanni Giraldi, if you're still online, apologies that I'm not going to talk very much about the Modern and Metabolic Clinic today, but of course that's also been an exemplar of care for people with medical complexity in addition to people who are aging, and lots of hard work done by Giovanni and colleagues in Modena. What about our own experience? So at the Royal Free Hospital, we look after about 3,200 people living with HIV. We noted that over half were over 50, with about 150 being over 70 years old. And we launched the Sage Clinic in 2019 to support people with HIV to age better. You can see that COVID really did age me. This is a picture here from 5 years ago. And as Christina pointed out earlier, I'm already looking older. Thank you very much indeed for that. In terms of our experience, what did we see? So you can see out of the cohort of people we saw 69 people in the first sort of couple of years, COVID permitting. And of those, in fact, most people scored 0 in terms of their 5-point Freed score. But you can see that 17% of people were scoring as either pre-frail or frail. And then you can see some of the HIV parameters down the side there. I won't go through those in detail because more interesting are the problems that people experienced. So the most common reported issues we saw were mood problems, memory problems, and issues with falls. We also identified some common hidden issues, including psychosocial issues, and some people, particularly as coming from LGBTQ plus populations, found it more stigmatizing to be getting older and were more apprehensive about the type of care they were going to receive, or potentially other stigmatizing views they were going to experience as they came into contact with other providers. You can see the problems we also identified on the list on the right-hand side there. I mentioned yesterday that we saw lots of urinary symptoms. We also saw bowel symptoms, including problems with continence, problems with breathlessness, isolation and loneliness, use of alcohol and other substances, and unsurprisingly some financial insecurity and problems with other metabolic disease in addition. So some of these predictable, I think, some perhaps were a bit surprising in terms of the frequency that we saw things with. We got very good feedback. I mean, this is a bit patting ourselves on the back, isn't it? But as I mentioned at the beginning, we know there's a passion for HIV care providers to provide aging care for people with HIV, and we often use this slide to motivate people who haven't yet got started with providing this kind of care, because we know that people with HIV enjoy having co-located, integrated, joined up care where possible in a service that they trust. Now, it was mentioned in the presentation from the US that one of the things that hasn't happened yet is looking out to providing more care in the community. Howell, our geriatrician at the moment, has expanded his service into the community to start providing care for people who are either housebound or living in long-term care facilities. This means he's currently coordinating the care of 20 individuals in this way. We've had 3 transfers from other HIV services in London solely to access this kind of community-based integrated HIV and geriatric care. And of course it involves liaising with lots of other services to make sure things are joined up, also attending community-based frailty meetings or best interest meetings to make sure things are joined up, and providing home visits to provide care in addition. And this has led to a lot of continuity of care when some of these individuals have been admitted to hospital for acute reasons in addition. Now, we heard resource mentioned. This is a fantastic way to look after these people. It's a fantastic level of service. Of course, this is an incredibly expensive and resource-intense way, I think, to provide this kind of joined-up HIV and geriatric care, and we're really going to need to analyse what the outcomes are, hopefully in terms of admissions avoidance to hospital, to show that there is some economic benefit to delivering care in this way. So economic analysis is really difficult, but I think really important when there's something that's being done that's so intensive as this kind of very senior doctor-led, community-based integrated care. What are we trying to avoid? This is what we're all really trying to avoid, and this is one of my final slides, so I'll leave you with this picture, but we know that people with HIV can fall between the cracks in their care. It can be very difficult to integrate care as you get older. People may experience problems with mental health, ongoing issues with their HIV. They may, of course, struggle with basic needs and social services. They may struggle to access primary care appointments or other outpatient appointments. And of course, there may be issues around multimorbidity and polypharmacy. And where I think we can step in, even if we can't provide bespoke services, is supporting people with some of that coordination of care. So helping them to manage some of the complexity that occurs with HIV and all of the comorbidities they experience as they get older. The phrase I'll often use with people is, I can't provide all of your care, but I'm happy to help you try and coordinate some of it so that you can get to the right appointments, so that we can make sure you have one blood draw rather than having 5 or 6 different blood draws at different outpatient appointments. If you need hospital transport, we can try and arrange that and co-locate some of your appointments on similar days so that you're not travelling to and from the hospital on multiple occasions. So there are some simple things you can do, I think, to help coordinate complex care as people get older, even if you can't directly provide a bespoke and very specialised service. So what do we need to know? This is preaching to the converted here, of course, but frailty, of course, is common, presents earlier in people living with HIV. We should screen people where possible, and we need to ensure strategies are in place to support those who are living with HIV, frailty, and, of course, medical complexity as they age. I'd just like to acknowledge my geriatrician colleague. This is Hal, also has changed his appearance quite significantly since this photo, but Hal is a fantastic resource. He came knocking on my door in 2019 and said, I've come to the Royal Free because I wanted to train in geriatrics and HIV. He was near the end of his geriatrics training and has really made a success of upskilling in HIV care so that the service he provides now really is truly integrated, and I'm very grateful to Hal for all of the time he's spent and is spending in our service. Thank you very much indeed.